Hey, welcome. Welcome to Bold Women Lawyers Spotlight interview. We're excited today. We have with us Becky Schmooke. Now, I'll tell you how Becky's not a lawyer, but she has a lot to tell us, which is incredibly helpful for lawyers. Becky and I actually met on a clubhouse room, and I have grown to love her and her point of view. But let me tell you a little bit about Becky. She is the founder of Becky's Mindful Kitchen. She speaks on mindful leadership based on Stoic wisdom, putting words into action, providing leadership and organizational health consulting. And she runs, as if she wasn't busy enough, she runs on-site and virtual leadership workshops. And when I talked to Becky about coming on, we talked specifically about storytelling because as a lawyer and a former litigator, I know how important that is, the ability to tell stories in a meaningful way. How important that is in front of a jury or talking to a judge or a decision maker. But it's important for all lawyers who talk to clients, which is all of us, or potential clients. So I was thrilled when she said she'd, be happy to come, and she's here with us today. So Becky, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I will tell you a story because I also run weekly summer camps for kids. And this morning I had a group of kids and we were doing it's fire camp week. So we're making fires and it's also archery. And I told them that I was going to be talking with you this afternoon. I said, well, guys, I'm going to be interviewed by this awesome woman. And they're like, oh, wow, what's it about? And I said what it was. I said, it's like storytelling for lawyers. And shockingly, the reaction from all 20 kids was, oh, they're like, that's really boring. And then one kid whose mother's a lawyer goes, yeah, my mom would like that one. And it was just, but he got it. But everyone else was like, oh, and I'm like, yeah. And that's what I love about what I do though, is it's such, they're very different things. Working with kids, in the morning, then talking with you about storytelling in law this afternoon, yet it is so connected because everything I do falls back to the idea of connection and how do we come together, communicate, and build these relationships. Mm-hmm. And that's where storytelling really can make a difference. Again, of course, in front of juries. And I always, in my talks on storytelling, I always say if, not when, but if you were to be ever charged with murder, you want a darn good storyteller as your lawyer.
Yes.
Because of the importance of that, right? But even if you never are in front of a judge, never in front of a jury, you're going to be interacting with other people. And you need to have people trust you. And to do that, storytelling, that's the key. That's the quickest way to build trust.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Becky. Yeah. So, sometimes I think when we think of storytelling, it's like making things up and, that's not what it is at all. So tell us from your point of view, really, what is storytelling and how do I as a lawyer go about figuring out how to tell the story I need to tell?
So there's when I teach storytelling, I teach two different types of stories. One, I call productive stories, right? These are the stories we share with others. And they're the stories of vulnerability. And it's not your brand story. It's not always telling stories of success because it's our stories of failure that are most powerful. And those, again, is the idea of being vulnerable and letting people say, see who you are. That makes a difference. So productive stories are the ones that be able to share with someone, be it a coworker who just screwed up really badly, be able to share a story of when you also messed up. Using those stories to make them relatable. People understand stories and connect with it. Just as importantly are the stories we tell ourselves. So those are what I call destructive stories. And the stories we tell ourselves are the ones that prevent us often from sharing the stories. So you hear that a coworker just screwed up really big, forgot to get something filed in time, and now, just got their butt chewed out by a partner. The story you might tell yourself is, if you were to share a story of your failure, that would make you look weak. right? Or if you were to go and comfort them and they don't want your comfort, they don't want to hear from you. All these stories that we tell ourselves that keep us from building that connection. And to that point is also the stories we tell ourselves that prevent us from being good at our jobs, right? Of like, well, again, it's the imposter syndromes and a fear and shame that keeps us quiet.
It's interesting that you talk about the destructive stories and it makes us look weak. We fear that if I talk to my colleague about, oh, yeah, I understand screwing up. Let me give you an example from my career. But lawyers for sure, I don't know about other professionals, but lawyers for sure really are pretty terrified of looking weak because we're taught that you don't ever look weak. You can't look weak to the other side, to anybody. You can't look weak. And yet, what you're saying is that that's really destructive. Am I understanding you right?
Yeah, and again, not a lawyer, but I did spend many years working in different law offices, and so I witnessed firsthand, from medical malpractice to workers' comp to family law, and in seeing again, yeah, this environment where you really are not given a lot of freedom to be vulnerable, to show weakness, to show that you're human. And to me, that's where I love being able to go in and work with the leadership because it is top down and important to create an atmosphere where, again, mistakes are allowed. And in giving that space of saying, okay, like, is it more important for people to give this facade of being, impenetrable, like perfect, doesn't make sense, grinding it out, or what happens? So to get curious, say, well, what would happen if we actually did acknowledge our vulnerability, acknowledge our fear, our anxiety. And that's where the stoicism comes into play because those fears of wondering what other people are going to think of us, when you kind of dig into stoic philosophy, is based on the idea that, hey, like we can't control other people. And so worrying about other people's reactions is a really big waste of time. We can only control, what we do, what we say. And so to lean into that idea of, okay, well, what's happening right now? Am I happy right now at work? Are things going well? Do I feel like I'm being a kind human being to other people? And if the answer is no to any of those, then what's the harm of trying something else? And that's where I kind of push back on that. Yeah, the stories we tell ourselves, and I always tell people too, as I cut you off there, is the idea that we tell ourselves these stories, and that there's a way to take those stories and turn those destructive ones into productive ones, and that's using the phrase like the story I'm telling myself, because we also get in trouble with these stories of, you you run into a partner or you are a partner and you run into a fellow and they give you kind of what you'd consider like, maybe a side eye, or their tone indicates that like they're pissed off at you, or they don't respond to an email for a couple of days. And we start telling ourselves stories about why they gave you that look, why they used that tone, and why they haven't responded to your email. And so often again, we read between the lines, except for we suck at accurately reading between the lines. Like just read the words that are on the line. Stop trying to read the ones that aren't there because they're not there. And then we get in trouble because then we allow our actions to be based on the stories we're telling ourselves about other people. And if you can then pause and just go to that person and say, hey, the story I'm telling myself is you're really upset at me because of what was said last week. And that's why you haven't responded to my email. And you give them an opportunity to respond, right, with the truth. And a lot of times it's, oh God, no, I didn't even see your email. Or I'm sorry, my kid has been sick all week. Things that we don't know. And so those are the other element of those destructive stories.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that up because I do think it is so easy to, what I'm going to say, personalize it that and make up the story as you described it in a way that's negative to you, when in fact, like you said, it could be, oh, that email, it must have gone in spam because I haven't even read it yet. So that's why I didn't respond. And yet, we have not only made up a story, but probably worked our emotions up related to very negative things, like he's mad at me, or I'm never going to make partner if you're in a bigger law firm, or some other really negative thing, when none of it's true. So
And we do
like
this in our
when you do,
personal life too. So yeah,
right, right.
with
But
our
how do
partners
you
all the
avoid
time.
that? How do you avoid that? Because I think we all do it. Like, oh, I
Oh
messed
yeah,
up, I screwed up, and how do I stop
yeah.
doing that?
So my go-to when I don't give a smart ass response is to lean into curiosity. So start just if you can just stay in a place of being curious. And that's to me the key to almost everything in life. I always tell people, like, I'm not a motivational speaker. I don't really care about motivating you because that's not going to do much good. But what I want to do is to get you in a place of curiosity. So you want to look at things differently. You want to dig into things. So the next time somebody says something to you and you find yourself having a negative reaction to it, get curious and be like, hold on a second. Like, what did they actually say? Is this based in fact? The story I've told myself, is it true? And if you still are wondering, have the courage to say to them, hey, the story I'm telling myself is that you don't think I'm good enough to try this case alone. The story I'm telling myself is you don't think that I have it, what it takes to make partner. And you say the story I'm telling myself, you're taking accountability and ownership. And that's a huge leadership move. You're not saying like you think this, or like, you're not putting them in a place to get defensive, because you're owning. You're saying like, I'm telling myself this story. It's easier said than done, but when you do it and you like see it play out, it's pretty awesome. And I did that this morning, and that's where all the weird random things I do, be it birthing goats, that we had 5 baby goats born last week, or teaching kids how to do like make survival style fires out there, is there was a kid who we were doing get to know you questions, and I live in Iowa City, so we don't have any professional sports teams, but we do have really intense college teams. And so we are the Hawkeyes here in Iowa City. And he said, if anybody doesn't like the Hawkeyes, like, they're crazy. And I said, hold on a second. I said, tell me more about that. He's like, well, there's like no reason why you wouldn't like the Hawkeyes unless if like you're crazy. And I do what I do, and I pushed back and I said, no. Very clearly I said, because I said, you don't know somebody's story. And you don't get to fill in their story. You have no idea why they don't like them, if they don't like them. And really push on again how often, starting as young kids all the way through adult, we are constantly trying to fill in stories, be it our own, be it others, instead of taking the time to be curious and ask someone, well, why don't you like this? Why wasn't this good enough? Instead of thinking, well, it wasn't good enough because I'm not good enough. Well, maybe you did something wrong, and that's okay. So just constantly call those stories out is my advice on how to start changing that.
Now, how about storytelling in the business of doing your law business? So there's juries and judges, and that's fine, but that's really not what I'm referring to. I'm more referring to just in my day-to-day marketing, my networking, my relationship building with potential clients, existing clients, other professional colleagues who may send me referrals. How does the whole idea of storytelling fit in with that, do you think?
So the reason why, whenever possible, you want to use storytelling is because when let's say you're meeting with a potential client and you're just laying out facts and figures, about 2 areas of the brain light up. When you tell a story, 7 areas of the brain light up. And in fact, like, when you tell a story, there's a really cool kind of chemical cocktail that goes together, where first, there's cortisol will be dumped out. And that's that, like, pay attention hormone, and it's like, okay, what's going on? We need to pay attention to this. It wakes you up. And then comes dopamine. And that's that hormone and neuron that like helps keep you interested, because you want the payoff. It's that motivator. You want to know how the story ends. And so you continue to pay attention, and it also helps you remember it. because we remember stories much longer than we remember anything else. And then at the end is the oxytocin, that connection. And when that is released, it connects the storyteller with the listener. And in fact, there's actually these mirrored neurons. And so the neurons of the listener and the storyteller will mirror each other. And that is, you can't beat that when it comes to connection. It's brilliant. And so you actually are, as I always say, you cut through the noise. Because right now, everyone's going a million miles an hour. There's so much trying to get our attention. And so if you're not using storytelling, you're really missing out on a key and easy, key element in free and easy. It's just so simple yet so powerful a way to get that connection with someone and get their attention and cut through the noise in a way that isn't a hack. Most hacks, there's a consequence to it or a compromise to mostly, hacks and shortcuts. Storytelling, there's no way you're losing on that one.
Yeah.
So to use it is to be able to say, you're meeting with a client, use that storytelling to get across the point you want to. And that's important to understand which details you include. Because you don't want to be the storyteller that's like, goes through like, oh, was it Jim or was it Jack? Oh man, it was Aunt Ethel's like great uncle. No one cares. That doesn't matter. Make up a name. There's sometimes in storytelling where you do make things up because they don't matter to the point. So if you're telling a story and you're like, I can't remember the person's name, make it up. As long as that detail doesn't matter, just make it up and keep the story going. Because the minute you slow down and get lost, the person listening, they're going to get lost with you. But they're not, very rarely do they come back with you.
So in terms of, just on the business side that we were just talking about. So I get it about using stories and you get people's attention. And so like for a lawyer, would you say, telling a story about how things worked out well without obviously identifying clients because of attorney-client privilege, how things worked out well versus how things didn't work out. And here's what just came to mind for me. I remember way back when a celebrity died, and I honestly don't remember if it was Michael Jackson or some other but a big celebrity died without a will. And so the really smart, I thought, trust and estate lawyers sort of jumped on that to say, here's what's going to happen. Let me tell you this story. Just like Michael Jackson or whoever it was, the celebrity that died, Sally Mae died without a will. She had 5 kids. They were under the age of 18 or whatever. That was important. And sort of wove that story. Here's what happened because she didn't have a will. Now, let me tell you this story about my other client, Fred. And Fred had all his affairs in order and the same kind of thing happened. And so they were telling stories related to the work they were doing, what good could happen, what not so great could happen, and then sort of leaving it, up to the person they were talking to. Now, which way, how do you want things for your family? Are those the kind of stories you're talking about, or is it something different?
Those work. You have to be careful. So I'm glad you brought this up because I talk about the power stories, and we have to recognize that I always say like power is not always positive. I mean, stories have what started. I mean, they've started wars. Stories are what Russia is using to justify what's happening in Ukraine right now, right? We create these stories, and if anyone who's on the receiving end of a rumor in high school can tell you that stories can suck, and they are a way of bringing people together, and that can be in a good way or a bad way, because again, it's a good way to build connection. And we hear stories a lot that hit at areas of fear, right? And anxiety and worry. And so we need to be cognizant of that when we tell our stories. So telling the story, yes, of like what happened to somebody when they didn't create a will. It's good at getting the point across, but you need to be careful that you are not using stories to scare people into becoming your client. and scare people
Good point.
into doing something they may not need to do, and to use a story that connects. Because if you use a celebrity, yes, that does help because you have the name recognition. But unless if your client also has the amount of assets they do, like it's not a very good story.
Right.
And so using one that connects into, for me, I think the most powerful ones are the ones that say like, hey, here's somebody who, they thought they had, goodwill done this way. This was an area that like, you can say like, I messed up at when I was a young lawyer and I screwed up and I didn't best advise somebody like this. And now that's why I now always say to follow through with this part. If you can make it someone and own your vulnerability and your mistakes and things, which again, you lawyers are about up there with doctors as being not good. It will build
Well,
that trust.
yeah, yeah,
Because then
yeah.
I'm feeling like, okay, if they're willing to say that they made a mistake once, right? And they've learned from it. And this is why they're telling me to do this, is because they screwed up at it themselves. I'm going to be much more likely to trust them and hear what they have to say. That makes sense?
But I think, with lawyers, and I know doctors are the same way because I used to defend them, but it's one thing to admit a mistake, but then you have professional implications, malpractice implications. Now, if you can admit a mistake and then say, and then I recognized it, and that meant I had to go back, I had to redo all the documents, et cetera. And because it was my mistake, I wasn't going to charge my client twice for it. So, I was the one that ended up having to spend the extra time to make sure that it was right. I think a lot of lawyers are certainly more than willing to do that. But honestly, it'd be very tough to come right out and say, I really screwed a client's will up, 10 years ago, and I hope it doesn't come back to haunt me, kind of thing. You know what I mean? That's the professional
to it. Yeah.
Yes.
I will say though, and a lot of studies show, and this is like, because I work with doctors a lot. That's all year. That's honestly been almost exclusively who I work with, are doctors and lawyers. I love you all both, but is we tell ourselves the story that if we do admit to a mistake, this is what's going to happen. And even when it comes to like getting sued and all that, it often shows that most people, if you do screw up, an apology, an authentic, real acknowledgement, that is what they want. Because especially in this, I know your audience isn't doctors, but in that world too, a lot of conflicts can be like solved with honesty, accountability, and a genuine apology. And we overcomplicate things. But if you are telling a story to a potential client and you say like, I screwed up for this person and I didn't learn a lesson and like probably going to do it again. Yeah, not a good story.
Right.
But say like, hey, like here's why I'm saying this. We have a family practice or family law attorney who did that recently, for us personally. And he's like, I'm pushing you guys to do this because he's like, I didn't do this once. And that has haunted me ever since then. And like, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. Here's what happened in that situation. Here's how I see the similarity to yours. And he's like, I don't want you to do the wrong thing. And I need to push for that. And so that, again, made me pay attention, made me trust him because I understood his motivation. And so that's where stories can be really good at helping explain your motivation. Why are you pushing for something? And that, again, gets their attention and they need to trust you. They're paying you a lot of money. Yeah.
I hear it. It's just, I do hear what you're saying. And I agree, that a sincere apology goes a long way. But a lot of lawyers, malpractice carriers, just like doctors, would be, shaking in their boots. Like, what do you mean? You don't admit that you made the mistake. So there's definitely a conflict there for all of us, because you may want to say, yeah, I really did make this mistake. Now here's how I'm going to rectify it, if you can. I think probably for lawyers, it's easier than for doctors because if you operated on the wrong, body part, it's going to be hard to correct that. But um,
That's a
uh,
tricky one.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
for sure.
tricky one.
But it's
Yeah,
not, again, everyone's a professional. They know which lines they can cross and which ones they can't.
yeah, yeah,
But we need to be careful that we don't allow the stories we tell ourselves, and especially even to admitting your mistake to other colleagues, right? Or
yeah,
to, if you're a
yeah.
doctor, to lean out, to reach out to, you know, a
Hmm.
fellow colleague, or to share, if you're in a teaching hospital, to the residents, to the medical students.
Yeah.
Being able to show your vulnerability and humanity and the fact that you screw up and you've made mistakes and here's what happened, that's what's going to get it across. And to the quick point of storytelling in the courtroom, what's so important is to recognize that, as I said, we fill in our own stories. So if you gave me, like, a weird look during this interview, I would very quickly, I could fill in my own story of what happened, right? Or if you give me only some of the details of something, I'm going to fill in the stories based with what I know. And that's what jurors do. And
Hmm.
so if
Hmm.
you're a lawyer and you're telling a story in the courtroom, you need to be aware that any details you leave out that are important, the people sitting there are filling them in themselves based on their own experiences. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you are filling in the details you want them to have. Because if you don't, they will fill them in themselves. And it's also so important then to recognize that, your body language is going to make a difference. They will see that and fill in a story. And how you interact with the other people, your client, and also the other lawyer, they fill in stories. And we get stuck, not we, you all lawyers get stuck in this idea again of like being tough and not showing weakness and like being just, what I call like little s stoic, of like thinking that you're showing no emotions to their people is helpful. But then what you've done is you've set yourself up to allow everyone there watching you to fill in the answers. If you
Hmm.
don't let them know who you are, if you don't let them know that you are somebody who can, be respectful to the other side, or, that that you're human, they're going to make their own judgments. And you better hope that you don't remind them of somebody that they don't like. And so
That's
that vulnerability is important.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And the other thing you said is that it struck me was as much as we try, lawyers who are in front of you're trying to read the jury, you're trying to what are they thinking? What you know, it's just a fool's errand in so many respects because as we've all learned the hard way, you may think you got the jury in the palm of your hand and they come back against you, or vice versa. So you realize that me spending my time trying to figure out what their story is, what they're thinking, I can't do that. I can't
Yeah.
make those assumptions. I can only know what I'm doing, what I'm saying, what I'm thinking, what I'm showing to them. And then making sure, as you said, that you as the lawyer make sure that they know all of the details that you want them to know, because otherwise they will fill in the blanks. We all do it. I would do the same thing if I was sitting on a jury, like, oh, well, they didn't tell me this, but I would assume that A, B, and C are true. Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not. And if I'm the lawyer, I may not want you assuming A, B, and C are true, right? Yeah.
Right.
So,
So what you want to stick, you need to put into story form. What you want them
okay.
to remember is in story form. And, and if you have, those who have kids will know that you can tell your kids a million times to brush their teeth twice a day, but they'll keep forgetting. But you tell them one time a story about when you did something dumb when you were in college and drunk, and they'll remember it and share it with everybody anytime they meet them. Like, they remember stories. And so be careful that if you want somebody to forget something, don't share it in a story. Share it as you would, a fact, like that you should brush your teeth. But to use that idea of the storytelling, that the stories we tell ourselves, as you mentioned, I love that you brought that up, of, you think you've read the jury and then, you haven't. Is remembering
Yeah.
I tell people, you're not special. And we think we're a lot more special than we are. And I used to make the mistake, Sharon, of I'd be giving a talk and I would focus on somebody in the audience. And if I didn't see the reaction I was looking for from someone, like I would hone in on that person. And like I would be willing to be like juggling fire breathing monkeys and like sword swallowing, all to get like some kind of reaction. I would start playing to that person. And that was such a huge mistake because telling myself the story that they're not enjoying themselves made me, abandon what I was there to do, which was to connect to the entire audience. And the same with if somebody gets up and leaves, in the middle of an audience talk. I had that happen recently. And the old me would have been like, oh my God, they're so bored. They just left. And now I can tell myself the fact of, I have no idea why they
Right,
left. I have no idea
right.
why somebody's looking at their phone. We don't know why the person in the jury box like looks like, they want to just like curl up in a ball and disappear. And whenever time you talk, you don't know. And so to stop, you have to walk that fine line of reading into it.
It's funny you mentioned that because I recently gave a talk at the Maryland State Bar Association annual meeting, and somebody that was in the talk gave every outward indication of paying absolutely no attention to anything I had to say, and appeared to be constantly on his phone. I assumed, answering emails or, whatever, but not paying attention. And when I was done, he came up to me and said, that was really great. I can't tell you how much I got out of it. And you may have thought I wasn't paying attention, but I was actually taking the notes on my phone. I'm like, oh, to myself, like, okay, don't make that mistake again. Don't write somebody off as, they're paying no attention to you. That's not the case at all. That's not the case at all. So that was a story I told myself that was clearly false. Clearly false. Yeah.
It is hard to though. I mean, it is very hard to at the moment not get caught up in it. But when you do give yourself the freedom to let it go, gosh, life gets a lot easier. If you can give yourself the freedom to like if that coworker, stops by and like, kind of just says a bit of a shitty thing to you, you can just like be like, all right, is this about me? Yeah, probably not, right? Or again, go to them and say, hey, the story I'm telling myself is like, you're mad at me. No, I'm not. Sorry. I'm just like, you know, having a really bad day. And that's
Ex-
sometimes all it is.
Exactly. Exactly. And we don't give ourselves the grace sometimes, I think, to just acknowledge that it's not me. It's not me. It has nothing to do with me. They have a whole life outside of me, and that I can't control. So I'm not going to let that story creep into my head. Yeah.
Yeah. And to be able to
Well,
share that final thing is to when you have clients and meet with them in a work time is to and see this is storytelling stuff is you keep looking up to that corner because you're checking the time and you want to be done. And that's like one thing like, hey, the storytelling stuff is you're saying shut up and you get opportunity to say, yes, Becky, absolutely correct story you told yourself. Well done. But is idea of you have your clients is to teach them that use that same language to them and to say like, hey, there's a good chance that I may not get back to you right away, or we may not hear back from the judge. We had a hearing, and the judge said to us, he said, "Oh, it won't be like it's a month before I get you your ruling." It was over 2 months, and it was really easy to like start to tell ourselves all these stories of why it was taking so long, and it would have been, it'd be great as a lawyer to be able to say to your client, hey, I know like it's tempted to say the story, you tell yourself is that they haven't gotten back to you for X reason or Y reason and be able to say like sometimes like things just get backed up. Right. And to catch your clients telling themselves stories and to use that language. And so you can have that better relationship and one where they feel like they can be vulnerable and real with you and have you not think that they're being silly for worrying like a lot of us because you guys do come across always as so professional and so on top of things that when I've ever had a lawyer who's humanized themselves to me. It's been really nice.
Well, that's great advice. That's terrific advice, because you're right. We do so frequently forget that, yeah, we're professionals and you need to be professional, but we're people too, just like our clients. And it's nice to come across to them like a real person. Well, Becky, this has been great. I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. I love this topic. And I love your point of view on it, because too often we don't stop to think about the story that we are telling ourselves. And yet, what a difference that makes. What a difference that makes. Yeah. So listen,
thank you so much. Yep.
If listeners want to get in touch with you, how did they do that? Where can they find you?
Well, there's every couple blue moons into I am on LinkedIn. I'm trying to get better, but it's an attempt. So either LinkedIn, you can find me there, or I do post daily on Instagram and Facebook. So all those things are Becky's Mindful Kitchen. And then I also have a website where you can contact me, and that's beckysmindfulkitchen.com. And wonderful. I hope the heat wave that's hitting us is it hitting you too?
A little bit here on the East Coast, but I'm hoping it's going to pass us by pretty quickly. So
I hope so too. Thank you so much. And next time I talk to you, I hope to be able to be less heat exhausted.
Yeah. No, we'll do it in the winter. How's that?
Sounds good. Oh man, thank you so much, Sharon.
Oh, you're welcome, Becky. So listen, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. We're doing a special LinkedIn Live this week on Thursday. I don't usually do it on Thursday, but I am doing one on Thursday with Allison Wang of Golden Gate University Law School, and she's going to be talking about externships, because that's what she runs for them, and how educating law students is changing, I think, for the better, in terms of helping to get some real practical experience before you even get out of school. So join me on Thursday at 2:00, and we'll talk to Allison. And Becky, stay cool for the rest of the summer.
I will. Thank you so much.
Okay.